Now let's make two things clear. ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents.
After weeks of dithering on ISIS, no strategy, containing them, degrading them, and destroying them, finally, we are clear-eyed. A definitive counter-terrorism campaign against the Islamic State. But not against Islam and not against a state. So who are we fighting? Mr. President, why are you so afraid of words? You scrubbed national security documents of the word jihad, which is Muslim for a war against unbelievers. Why did your CIA director scrub Islamist before terrorist in the Benghazi talking points? And why is the Fort Hood shooter engaging in workplace violence when he yells Allahu Akbar and his business card says, Soldier of Allah? Just weeks before a midterm election, the vast majorities of Americans, Mr. President, believe you don't have a clue about foreign policy. You refuse to use the word war. What's with the counterterrorism offensive? Who do you think you are, Jack Bauer? This isn't 24. When you bomb people, send in drones to kill people, order 1,000 military advisors to Iraq, and they cut off our heads, I've got news for you. We're at war. Even your own Pentagon says we know we're at war. So why? Might not saying the word war allow your buddies in Congress to avoid a war vote in an election year? And not sending ground troops, might that be a part of the same political calculation? Even the New York Times says that your so-called Arab allies offer only tepid support. Now, the Arab world has everything to gain by the destruction of ISIS, but they're reluctant to join you because you are not a true ally, you are not a man of your word, and because you are not there for them. Evidence. Egypt. You supported the overthrow of American ally Mubarak for Muslim brother Morsi. You remember your 2009 apology for being an American speech in Cairo, where you actually handpicked the two front rows of Muslim brothers? Even the Egyptians ousted this Muslim brother because he was too extreme. He imposed Sharia law, released terrorists from prison, and tried to give parts of Egypt to terrorists. Their newly elected president still has not gotten the arms you gave to the Muslim brothers as they fight their own war in Egypt against Islamic extremists. Evidence. You got out of Iraq too soon. The consequences were predicted by your predecessor.
I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It'd mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
ISIS is gaining affiliates among extremist groups around the world. They are signing up. These groups are signing up for what ISIS desires as its objective, a global caliphate. In the mind of ISIS, its global caliphate would extend to the United States of America itself. ISIS has gained affiliates faster than al-Qaeda ever did. From nothing a year ago, there are now militant groups in nearly 20 countries that have sworn allegiance to ISIS.
That runs counter to what President Obama said about ISIS in November.
Well, I don't think they're gaining strength. What is true is that from the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them. They have not gained ground in Iraq, and in Syria, they'll come in, they'll leave, but you don't see this systematic march by ISIL across the terrain.
But that's exactly what the former CIA director says they are capable of.
And they carry the potential to themselves grab large amounts of territory. Libya is a place where this could happen in the near term. ISIS controls territory in Libya. They are currently expanding that territory, and foreign fighters are beginning to go to Libya to fight with the ISIS group there. I would not be surprised if we woke up one morning and ISIS in Libya had grabbed a large part of Libyan territory, the same kind of blitzkrieg on a smaller scale that we saw in Iraq.
Is it comments like this that cost the director his job? Why are Obama's comments at odds with those of his former CIA?
Well, we don't operate under international law. What we have is the color of law, the law of the jungle, in which the rich and the powerful basically determine what goes and what doesn't go. Iraq is a perfect example of that. Why isn't Tony Blair and George Bush rotting away in a prison cell for the rest of their lives? Because the law is not being applied. These are war criminals, and they should be in prison for the rest of their lives, if not executed, if their own rules were adhered to for their own crimes. Not only that, but we need to really understand the truth here. First off, all of these players, these politicians, are nothing more than puppets. They don't serve the people. There is no real democracy. They really serve the rich and powerful who run the world, and that would be the bankers who control the money supply. The bankers, of course, make huge amounts of money. Whether they make bad investments or not, wars are great for them, and ultimately they control the politicians, and that is why we see these policies. Obama and Cameron are nothing more than puppets who read the script, and the script is we need another war. And the reason why we need another war, according to these psychopaths who are running the world, is because more and more people, despite the clueless masses who continue to be entranced by things so ridiculous as X Factor and American Idol, there is larger numbers of people around the world who are realizing the truth and beginning to recapture the capacity to think for themselves. And they can see that these people who are being put in positions of public trust are defying that trust and representing an agenda which they could never speak about openly, because they're nothing more than prostitutes and nothing more than minions for the powers that be. Well, the Greater Israel Project is all about destabilizing surrounding nations, ultimately in pursuit of this dream of Greater Israel from the Euphrates down to the Nile, all the way over to the Eastern Mediterranean. This is the dream of these psychopaths, and so destabilizing governments, creating sectarian strife is all part of that menu and all part of the design to create Greater Israel. So that goes, it's self-evident. But I have to go back to what this gentleman is saying in Washington, D.C. about America not wanting to get involved or Obama not getting involved. What are you talking about? We have been arming people directly who are Al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra Front is Al-Qaeda. These people are psychopaths to the worst order. They are conducting suicide attacks. They are gassing people. We know, Carla Del Ponte said in May, that it was the so-called rebels in Syria that were using sarin gas, not the Bashar al-Assad regime. No, it was not. We know that the United States president is arming people who are on the U.S. terrorist list. He should be convicted of aiding and abetting, giving material support to a terrorist organization. But then again, you know what? We, the West, the United States in particular, Israel and Britain, are the biggest terrorists on the planet. So our little junior partners in Al-Qaeda, which is nothing more than a CIA database, thus the name Al-Qaeda, this is nothing more than a group of terrorists working together, each playing one different role, but all of them working together for the same goal, which is to maintain this hideous and sick and twisted, unjust world that we have, which is a perpetual state of war. Always one illusion, one boogeyman after another. But the fact is, Obama is nothing more than a puppet war criminal, just like his predecessor and every other U.S. president before him. So please don't tell people out there that the U.S. is not involved. It's directly involved, and it is arming people who are absolute psychopaths.
Iraqis fled when ISIS took control of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. Seen here, their chief executioner, known as the Desert Lion, quizzes Syrian truck drivers over their religious fidelity before brutally killing them after discovering they weren't Sunni. But the brutality may extend far beyond the Middle East. In 2009, their leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, reportedly promising American soldiers from Long Island that he'd see them in New York.
Well, it may be considered by many to be a nightmare scenario. Al-Qaeda-related group ISIS will now formally declaring the creation of an Islamic State and demanding allegiance from other Muslims all over the globe. The militants control a large swath of Iraq and Syria, as you can see, and now they are installing Sharia law. For more on this, KT McFarland, our Fox News security analyst, joins us now. You know, KT, they've declared a caliphate, which is an Islamic empire ruled by Sharia law, and that basically brings them back to the 7th century. That's been their goal.
You know something, try like, 500 BC is really what's going on. This is a fight that has been going on for 2,500 years. It's between Persia and the Persian Empire on one hand and the Babylonian Empire on the other. And that's who's fighting today. Now, today we call them Shiites and Sunnis, but it's the same fight. It's the same tribes that have been fighting for over 2,000 years. And I think we can expect the fighting to continue, regardless of whether they've declared themselves a caliphate and Islamic State.
Well, when you're facing this, can the government of Baghdad and can al-Maliki's forces defeat them?
No. And that's why it's a fight between the two groups. I mean, the Maliki government, the Baghdad government, they're really the sock puppet for Iran. They're doing whatever Iran's telling them to do. Their own military, the Iraqi military, folded like a cheap suit the minute they were confronted by some 4,000 al-Qaeda gang guys who showed up and basically scared the living daylights out of them. So you have on one hand the Iraqi government with Iran and Syria, and on the other hand you have al-Qaeda. And it's ISIS. In fact, al-Qaeda thought ISIS was too badly behaved. They were chopping off too many heads. They didn't even want to affiliate with them. But now they are really, it's al-Qaeda versus Iran.
Hey, man,
we don't belong in that fight.
And Iran, man, oh man, they are backing al-Maliki as strongly as they can.
Well, sure, because they don't want to lose the region. I mean, they see that what's happened is that al-Qaeda is establishing, as you point out, this caliphate, this Islamic State. They don't want that to happen. They want to be the top country. They want to be the hegemonic power in the region, so that's why they're fighting it out. And I think that's why it's foolish for us if we think we're going to somehow go in with a couple of hundred Americans and keep on one side and the other side people who've been fighting each other for thousands of years.
This has been a centuries battle and struggle. What about the new boss, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? I mean, he's been a fiery leader. He is at odds, of course, with some members of al-Qaeda. He wants to change his name. Now they're saying that he is Khalif Ibrahim, and they're changing the name of their group from ISIS to basically just Islamic State. So is he the new head of what is going to be a growing Islamic State in the Middle East that we cannot do anything about?
Yes, and he's been considered by some to be another bin Laden. He's charismatic, he's very strategic in his planning, long-range goals, and he's ruthless. Now, add to that the fact that these guys are going to control oil. They're going to control a lot of resources. So however we may think of them now, they are only going to grow stronger. And I think as an American, we got to stop back and think, okay, what are our vital interests in the region? We're not going to affect this century-long, millennia-long fight. We need to realize we better get our energy from someplace else, like America, because those oil fields are going to be taken over or in the hands of either Iran or al-Qaeda, or they're going to be blown up. And we also better understand that that fight is coming to us, and so we should get serious about protecting our own homeland and securing our own border.
Iraq's prime minister says the declaration of an Islamic State by rampaging extremists is a threat not just to his country, but the entire Middle East. And while the world continues to watch for the American response, someone else is already getting involved. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the latest from here in Washington.
Russian warplanes have arrived in Baghdad to fill the vacuum after Iraqi leaders complained U.S. F-16s, not scheduled for delivery until the fall, were taking too long. Fighter jets that the Iraqis had already paid for. Iraqi pilots emerged from the Sukhoi fighter jets as rumors that Iran, too, was providing fighter planes made their way to the State Department.
Based on our data, I provided examples of the financing of different Islamic State units in different countries by private individuals. Financing, as we have established, comes from 40 countries, and there are some of the G20 states among them.
Russia warned of a new world war starting in Syria on Thursday after a dramatic day in which Gulf states threatened to send in ground forces. Foreign and defense ministers of the leading international states backing different factions in the war-torn country met in separate meetings in Munich and in Brussels following the collapse of the latest round of peace talks. Both Russia and the United States demanded ceasefires in the long-running civil war so that the fight could be concentrated against Islamic states of Iraq and ISIL, but each on their own conflicting terms. Both the Gulf states, led by Saudi Arabia, staged their own intervention, saying that they were committed to sending in ground troops to the country. Their favorite rebel groups have been pulverized by Russian air raids and driven back on the ground by Iranian-supplied pro-regiment troops. They said their declared target was ISIL, but the presence of troops from Gulf states, which have funded the Syrian rebels, will be taken as a hostile act by the Assad regime and its backers, and a sign that they were committed to staking their claim to a say in the final Syrian settlement. Russia issued a stark warning of the potential consequences. The Americans and our Arab partners must think well. Do they want a permanent war? Its Prime Minister Dmitry told the German Handelsblatt newspaper in an interview due to be published on Friday but released on Thursday night. It would be impossible to win such a war quickly, especially in the Arab world, where everybody is fighting against everybody. All sides must be compelled to sit at the negotiation table instead of unleashing a new world war. For the last couple of weeks, Turkish troops have been massing at the Syrian border. If Turkey decides to invade Syria, there is no doubt that would quickly start World War III. This is another story that we'll keep our eyes on. Stay tuned.
This is a breaking news alert. New details confirm our reports of a secret plan to deploy fresh boots on the ground in Iraq, of upwards of 100,000 troops. The international press reports Saudi Arabia is leading a newly formed 34-state Islamic military coalition to combat terrorism. Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir said at a briefing in Paris on Tuesday, the new Islamic military coalition will share intelligence, as well as train, equip, and provide the troops necessary to fight the Islamic State, a move welcomed by the United States. When asked whether the Islamic military coalition could include troops on the ground, Al-Jubeir stated, quote, "Nothing is off the table. It depends on the requests that come, it depends on the need, and it depends on the willingness of countries to provide the support necessary." In early December, Next News Network reported the then secret plan to deploy 100,000 troops as detailed by an Iraqi politician who claimed Arizona Senator John McCain was a driving force behind the plan. The McCain plan includes the deployment of 10,000 United States military forces, and upwards of 90,000 from the Islamic military coalition. It is unclear, at the time of this report, whether or not Iraq supports the new coalition. Currently they are rejecting any coalition support from the United States and Britain. Considering John McCain is a key player in this new coalition, and he wants to contribute 10,000 US forces to it, it's unclear if Iraq, or President Obama, will permit to the deployment. While President Obama made same-sex marriage and restricting Americans' Second Amendment rights his primary focus for the past several years, ISIS has grown 4,400% according to the director of the CIA. Obama has repeatedly stated he will not deploy troops to the region, even though he's already approved the first 200. We'll provide our subscribers with more information on this developing story as more information becomes available. Please distribute this to your social networks, and as always we welcome your input in the comments below.
Troops from Oman, Egypt and Kuwait and several other countries have arrived in Saudi Arabia to take part in the largest military exercise in the region, in terms of participating countries and equipment. At least 20 Islamic countries are scheduled to participate in the North Thunder War Games in the northern region of the kingdom, Saudi reports said on Monday. The participating countries are Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, Senegal, Sudan, Maldives, Morocco, Pakistan, Chad, Tunisia, the Comoro Islands, Djibouti, Malaysia, Egypt, Mauritania, and Mauritius. The equipment the forces will be using will include fighter jets of different models, a wide range of artillery, tanks, infantry, air defense systems, and naval forces. The official Twitter account for North Thunder said the exercises were being held at King Khalid Military City from February the 14th. until March the 10th. A military exercise will be commanded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with the participation of 20 countries and the Peninsula Shield Forces. The main objective is to demonstrate the high combat readiness of the participating armed forces and their readiness and ability to function successfully in joint operations. The Peninsula Shield is the military arm of the Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC), the alliance that comprises Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The exercise will be a clear message that Saudi Arabia and its allies stand united in confronting all challenges and preserving peace and stability in the region, the Saudi press agency SPA reported. Last week, Saudi Arabia sent aircraft to Turkey to assist in the fight against terrorists from the Islamic State.
This is a breaking news alert.
Breaking news now, Syria is ready for war with the Saudis. TASS news agency reports that Damascus and its allies will fight back in case of Saudi Arabia's ground operation. That's according to the Syrian ambassador to Russia. Riyad Haddad said in an interview with the Rossiya 24 television channel on Monday, quote, "First, Saudi Arabia is taking no effort to do away with the Islamic State and terrorism. Second, Saudi Arabia is mired in Yemen. It cannot withdraw from there, and one can see no end to it," he said. "Why should they come to Syria? We will resolutely fight back along with our allies." Of course, he's talking, when he references his allies, he's talking about Russia. Quote, "I have no idea of what the Saudis are going to do, no idea of their scenario," he noted, "but I am optimistic about Syria's future. They will achieve nothing. Our army will repel them." Earlier, Saudi Foreign Minister Adel al-Jubeir said his country was ready to deploy its special task force in Syria in case the international coalition took a decision to launch a ground operation in that country. So folks, we've been reporting for quite some time now that the Saudis are intending to fight. They are intending to go ahead and launch a ground invasion of Syria, along with the Turks. They're waiting for the green light from the United States, from the U.S.-led coalition. Now, this is the first we've heard of Syria stating, look, we're ready to do it. Bring it on. So the Syrian military is saying, look, we're ready to fight. But now we're about to see, potentially, a real, full-blown war. Army against army, not just small rebel factions. The Syrian army is ready with the Russians. The Turks and the Saudis are ready to go. So hopefully diplomacy will prevail and we won't get to that level, but certainly all sides are ready.